Welcome, reanimated fans, to this week's episode. Doing a couple of very close together episodes because we can and we wanted to. It's 2025 after all, so let's do it. Also, it gives us an excuse to watch more of Silo Series 2, which is great. I am H.A. Conrad, as always, coming to you from Brooklyn. Here is my intrepid co host on the West Coast, Stuart Tiffin. Hello.
G'day, mate.
And we are talking today about Barricades, which is episode 6 in season 2 of the Silo series. Yes, I
Y'all.
think. And this is a pretty good episode. I'm just really loving this show. I haven't really disliked any episode other than, sometimes there's a little bit of a slow burn. We do have
I
one
wouldn't
little.
say you could slow this one and the one before have just had so much going on.
There's a lot packed in. But before we get to that, we do have one little news article that jumped out at us about Norman Reedus, his involvement in this John Wick spin-off, which is called Ballerina. And he talks a little bit about choreography, fighting styles, and the big thing that's highlighted out of this is his semi-trash talk about Walking Dead, but just basically saying that the choreography is a little bit sloppier, or he just says it's sloppier,
He
right?
says very sloppy. The
Eh,
Walking Dead's very sloppy. This, talking about Ballerina, is very choreographed. And a lot of people put it together to make it look safe and look spectacular. So putting that sentence next to The Walking Dead, very sloppy, Ballerina, very good, very, very nice, very safe, very spectacular. I mean, I assume most of his money is still coming from The Walking Dead, so it's a little bit of a dangerous stance to take.
Maybe, but he's locked into a contract. It's not like they're not gonna like stop. And I don't know. I could see where he's coming from because I do think that the television shows have a much tighter turnaround time and you just don't have as much time to rehearse as you would for a movie. And I mean, for movies, it's like you have whoever's training you or whatever, and you have leading up to the point where you're doing these scenes. It is a different animal entirely. So I could see that.
I mean, you've seen those sequences, these trainings videos of Keanu Reeves going to
Yeah.
like gun ranges. I'm sure Norman Reedus doesn't get to go and do that, like to prep for his scenes of charging down a hallway with a knife and a morning star. So yeah, he probably doesn't get quite as much prep time on his action sequences. So choreographed or not, Daryl Dixon still manages to slay bodies.
Yep. So I thought I'm excited to see this movie though. Did you watch any of the John Wick movies?
I don't think I'm all the way caught up, but yeah, I've seen several of them. They don't really stand apart as far as they kind of blend together. I'm not sure what the plot is after the
They're,
first one.
I think that they're fine. Bill really loves them.
That is interesting. What
Yeah.
what is it? Does he just like the world building or what?
He likes that. He likes the choreography. I think he just really loves Keanu Reeves too.
Yeah.
He's very cool. And I mean, who doesn't? Keanu Reeves is great. But I think he just enjoys it when somebody is that good at what they do. So, he's got that, absolute competency as a hitman thing, I guess that he really likes. So that it's weird. It's like he'll watch that, but he does not love the zombie thing because it involves zombies. I don't know. But this is equally strange. I don't know. It's what it is.
Okay.
But anyway, I'm gonna check that out. I didn't did was there a release date on this yet?
Yeah, June 6th. So not till the summer. And by that time we're gonna be slavering for 28 years later. So I don't know that we'll have much attention span for ballerina by when June rolls around.
There's more than enough attention span, but all good, all good. But are you ready to jump into our discussion about barricades?
Barricades. Yes, episode 6 of season 2, directed by Michael Dinner, and Jeffrey Wong is the writer. Uh, this, as you said, is a fairly Bernard focused, but there's also a lot of the focus does get kind of spread around because Bernard, while he is everywhere, they need to give him time to get from every location in the silo to every
Right.
other location in the silo. And so while Bernard is racing from level 1 to level 50, we also get to spend some time, a lot of time with Shirley and Knox and with Robert and Camille, a little bit of time with Walker and Dr. Nichols and folks like that. It begins where we kind of left off. Actually, it begins a little bit dissonantly to me. When the last episode ended, a barricade was broken down and a mob was descending. And now there, it does not begin with like pure anarchy, which is kind of where I thought we would start. It begins
Yeah.
with a very regimented barricade being maintained by raiders
Yep.
and mechanical or down deepers chanting for basically respite or let them through because they're not getting any deliveries through this barricade and the raiders are holding firm and you can see porters like sitting on the stairs waiting to take things down to them.
Yeah, and you can see like there's definitely a power struggle. This is the thing that Bernard can do is withhold supplies and this is how you control mechanical. So while mechanical has control over the power, they have control over, say, food. So that's and other supplies obviously. So
Yeah. That
that's
was that was an interesting conversation in the last episode. I don't remember if we touched on it when they were talking to that plumber Asa and he was like, I'm just going to go and keep the whole silo running as a plumber
yep,
and Knox was like, "Man, I tell everybody in mechanical that every day. Do you think everybody thinks that about their
yeah,
job?"
and I think they
Uh
do.
they had
Uh,
that realization that everybody basically is like, yeah, if I wasn't doing what I do, none of this would work. But yeah, and in a way, you know, that's true, but and it's true. Like, if everybody stopped doing what they did, or stopped letting food through, things would break down. And they're in a pickle. I really like the way that this story evolves throughout this episode, because not only is Bernard using every play in the order, this playbook that he has, which is it's pretty cruel. Like when things happen in this episode, he's like, "Oh, good, earlier than expected." Like when they start dropping food down the recycling chutes, and he's like, "Oh, good, now we can move on to our next step in the plan." I thought that like that's cool. That's good writing. It makes you think that he's at least one step ahead of mechanical. But it also there's a scene that lets you know that they kind of expected him to know that they were going to do that. They're like, "Well, this is the last time we're going to get this food, so what are we going to do next?"
right. Yeah, it's interesting, and this little tug of war between them is interesting. Um, and I have to also say, like, the great thing about the Bernard character is that Tim Robbins is a phenomenal actor, and because of what he did to Meadows, you know that he doesn't have any qualms. He doesn't have any qualms about doing incredibly terrible things if he thinks it's in the interest of, whatever protocol he's got to follow, right? Um, though he doesn't like having to do it. And I would say if I were Sims, I'd be pretty damn nervous, after his quote unquote promotion. Uh,
Yeah.
it feels like there's a lot going on there. And so that's something like if I were Sims, like the only thing I kept thinking whenever like it was like Sims better watch his back, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I also think that Sims and Bernard are two mostly aligned people. Other than the fact that Sims kind of did an end run around Bernard, I think their goals are basically the same, which I don't think you can say the same for Bernard and Meadows. And,
right.
to not to skip completely to the end, but I definitely don't think you can say the same of Lucas, Kyle, and Bernard.
True.
So it's kind of odd the way, if you're thinking about this just from Bernard's decision-making matrix, why he's choosing to ice out Sims in favor of other people.
Well, I think it's because he thinks Sims is too powerful.
Yeah,
And
yeah, but like I guess maybe he thinks he can control these other folks.
yeah, I
Or
do.
or he was like too nostalgic or sentimental about Mary Meadows and he
Maybe.
thinks he can control Lucas Kyle because Avi Nash is playing kind of a more submissive guy in Kyle, I think.
Mm.
Maybe. At least he feels a little bit timid.
Well, and he's got obviously he has some very specific leverage over Kyle that he has some stuff over Sims, but not like he does over Kyle.
Yeah, can't he just
Overlook.
disappear anybody? Like, isn't that kind of one of the things he can do? He could probably disappear Sims if he wanted to.
But Sims has Camille, and Sims still has some loyalty, I think, amongst the Raiders. Or
Actually, they do show that in this episode that he has loyalty
yeah, so
with Diego.
yep,
But yeah, so we another interesting early on scene in this episode is when Shirley and Knox, after kind of getting patched up from their horrendous sort of drop down the chute, down the stair, the shaft of the silo in the last episode, they go to that like sheet metal shop where Martin, I think his name is Martin, is there, and we'd seen Knox go there before and say, "Don't make weapons for anybody, please." Or
yep,
if anybody comes to you asking for weapons, don't give them to them.
right.
But here's another request I have for you, and then we didn't hear what it was, and apparently it was just only please wait, make weapons for me, which
Yep,
which is that was funny too, and a good TV writing, I thought, when they just unveil a table full of weapons and armor, and then Mechanical is getting all medieval from then on. I don't know that they're the Raiders are definitely when Mechanical shows up at the barricade wearing their little breastplates, the Raiders their reactions are kind of great. They're like, "Oh my God, now they have armor and weapons and we're screwed.
yep,
Somebody go get the guns." The advanced tactical, whatever they called them. They had some euphemism for guns that I thought was funny.
yes. And I mean, look, this is a lot of chess playing, and as you said, both sides have some idea of what the move is going to be.
Yeah.
Um, so
Like
I
I'm happy that Mechanical is being clever. I want them to be clever, but doesn't it also feel like a rapid evolution for them to go from being kind of ignorant of the fact that they were the sacrificial lamb to being able to play this three-dimensional chess with Bernard?
mm, it does feel like a leap, but maybe they've discovered more that we don't know about yet.
Or and Knox and Shirley are just two intelligent people who are able to just make connect those dots in a way that maybe I wouldn't be able to. That's for
And
sure.
I also think that one of the interesting things, just even in watching Knox and Shirley, they've had different ideas about the way they were going to go about this. And loyalty is the name of the game. Even, one of the big issues or one of the big things that happens is that, when like we hear Bernard kind of cackling about, oh, it takes, you have the barricade up and does he say like 9 meals, 9 missed meals?
Yeah.
Like, and then, they have stores. So you're like, how's that going to work? And then their food's poisoned. And that is a huge thing because it means that somebody down there in mechanical is responsible for doing that.
And it might be Diego's aunt or not. I don't know. It's probably not.
Knows who it is. But point is that knowing that there is someone in your ranks that's doing this, that there is somebody that is exerting that pressure, like, because it's also them down there too. So I don't know. That is a pretty rough realization. And to not know who the sabotagers are, basically, or what saboteurs are, you have to figure out a way to unite everybody down there so that everybody's pulling together because this is deliberate, obviously, and this is certainly a play that Bernard is very familiar and has made, he's got spies, he's got people that he's got leverage against. That's what he does. And so I thought that being played out was a pretty interesting thing to watch, and to watch like how things are starting to come to a head in mechanical. And um I don't know. I thought this was interesting information, an interesting way to spin it out as a storyline. Um and then, the whole allies thing, as you said, like Bernard's like, oh yes, ha ha ha. That's happening, but that's not going to be a long-term solution. So this is
Which, sorry,
kind of
which ally are you referring to?
well, people at some point throw some food down to them, right? Like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah. Like the Juliet lives on, and th those were, it turns out, on 122, which comes into play later in the episode, where there happens to be a farm.
Mm-hmm.
So they did get one last shipment of food. And you know what's important to point out too is in earlier episodes this season, Shirley and Knox were not always on the same page. She was
Right.
still blaming him for turning Juliet over to the police at the end of the last season. And then once they got on the same page, it does feel like they are much more of a force to be reckoned with. And so that has been a cool like force multiplier for Mechanical, even though they have a hard time still persuading the mob of their mechanical and lower deep folk to work together. But they do so with some theatrics and like wagons full of food they wheel into the cafeteria in that one scene. And then they have some other, classic TV writing where they just don't tell you what the plan's going to be, and then they do the plan and it works out. I also liked how when they do decide to dig through the floor and go around the barricade, because they come up with this plan to basically move the barricade up to 120, 10 floors higher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the people up there are like, "Hey, this is our floor. Get the hell off of it." They
Yep.
don't want to be part of the barricaded off area.
Yep.
Um, but and we'll see if that's still a point of contention as the story goes ahead, or if they're not going to care because they've got a farm and they'll probably be okay. And I imagine they'll. I don't know. We'll see. They've certainly
A
Bernard's
little
super
bit of
angry. Go ahead.
there's a little bit of convenient reshuffling of like different like we have Billings down there.
And
Um
Billings' wife going down was
really
crazy.
her going down and then as we kind of suspected
Nichols.
we got Dr. Nichols to go down there. I do like that um Billings' wife Kathleen is still she's doing her own thing, and again we see with her and with Camille like they are very allied with their partners, although Camille, we'll talk about that, but she manages to like convince them that she's got to go through the barricade and gets Dr. Nichols through. Um, but so we have all these sort of players down below the barricade, which ends up being, this helps push the plot along. It did feel a little bit convenient to me, but that's fine. I mean, we have no, I think Dr. Nichols at this point does not care at all. So he's just like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah, he basically laid that on Bernard's desk at the end of last episode. He was like, "Look, there's nothing left." So, and when Kathleen comes to him, he's just like, "Sure, I'll go through the barricade, whatever." And then she comes up with some pretty good lies in the moment and bluffs her way past the Raiders, who are pretty aggressive, and takes her baby through that guard post. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, they are actively trying to starve out everybody past this barrier, and you're taking an infant through there. And I felt, you know, not knowing how the rest of this episode was going to go, I was concerned for her and her child. But I think by the end of this episode, I'm less concerned. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting that you brought up that comparison between Robert and Camille Sims and Paul and Kathleen Billings. They are very parallel,
Mhm.
two power couples, if you will, but very different, but also very similar, where the men have the quote unquote important jobs. The spouses, though, are doing a lot of the strategy.
Right.
Um, yeah. And there's a cool scene where she kind of she's like, "Hey, lift, pass me that water glass." And she's like, "Look, your syndrome's gone. You're cured. The syndrome is mental, apparently. He just had to like not be morally compromised to get over it or something."
See, I wasn't sure if it was that or if somebody was dosing him somehow. Like it
Yeah.
maybe something was going on in the upper levels. Um, like because his syndrome was like pretty intense, and I don't know. It felt like maybe. See, I thought there may be some Bernard involvement in his syndrome or in any of the people with the syndrome that it was another use of control, but maybe I'm wrong.
Could be. I mean,
So,
we might find out.
Um, and then the other part that I thought was, there's the whole interactions between Patrick and Billings, and you know, Billings has been a by the book kind of person. We saw it as he was sort of dealing with the stuff with um, Juliet, and he really is just like, okay, I'm just going to do the things that you know, I'm going to find out. I don't care what it means. And even though Patrick, because he gets a little, he tries to go back on his word after he gets treated. Suddenly, when he's feeling better, he's like, oh yeah, I'm not going to tell you anymore. Um, it's Billings could make a choice here, and he could just be stay in the dark. And Patrick even almost like begs him to. He says, "You really don't want to know about what I'm going to tell you because you almost like you can't unhear it." And I think because he already showed him the page, he knows that Billings knows a little bit of it. But this is almost like, to me, this is like the point of no return for Billings, where he's just like, okay, I'm going to be the Juliet here in a way, versus the tool of Bernard. And Bernard is still, that's the kind of interesting thing. Bernard is still sort of unaware of what the current state of affairs is. He doesn't know that Billings is doing these things, and he may even think that he's got this ally down there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of a cool idea.
It's a cool scene too when after Billings goes, he finds Knox and Shirley. He really doesn't do much of, I would say, an investigation. I mean,
Yeah.
through talking to Kennedy, and then he goes and talks to them. He's like, "So, did the whole Meadows thing go down, this way?" And they're like, "Nope." He's like, "Okay." And then he calls Bernard. He's like, "Bernard, I got to do an investigation into the Meadows thing." And then Bernard's like, "All right, radios are shut. That's it, shutting that down." And then he
Give
goes,
it all.
damn, I've lost the sheriff."
Yep.
I thought that was cool. Like that's part of the playbook that he's got too, undoubtedly. And because when we saw in Silo 17 in the original flashback from the beginning of the season, the sheriff was leading the rebellion against the IT, and so I'm sure it's part of some part of the yeah, counterinsurgency, the counter insurgency. It's all fascinating. Also, Billings, when he came in there, interrupted Knox and Shirley about to get
Oh
more
yeah.
acquainted. There was some
There was
smooching happening.
there was some interrupted smooching. So I'm sure that will become complicated. So we'll see how that goes.
I mean, they're both eligibly single bachelors, right?
Oh no, they definitely are, but they're both like incredibly independent and
He's her boss.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And they've been butting heads about how to do things. Now they're more aligned, so maybe they become more aligned, but um that's kind of an interesting thing. Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out.
What did you think of the role Camille plays in the moving of the barricade? Because Sims gets a tip that this is happening, and he does try to go and find Bernard to tell him about it, but instead finds Lucas Kyle in Bernard's office and freaks Kyle out.
And he's
He's
like,
like,
WTF.
"What are you doing here?" And Kyle's like, "I'm just working on a project." And Sims leaves in a huff and then sees his wife because he's in IT. And he's like, "So I know about this thing because Diego from surveillance has told him about his aunt and her intel about two groups of mechanical people moving around with a concrete cutter."
Yeah.
And so he knows that they're cutting up through the floors. Camille now has this information too. And she's like, "I guess, let them make mistakes." And to his credit, he has tried to inform them,
Mhm.
but that's kind of where his efforts end because he's not supposed to have this information anyway.
Right.
But then she shows up in her raider outfit at the barricade or with a bunch of raiders,
Yep.
and she is kind of instrumental in Amundsen agreeing to give up all that territory, even though I think the raiders have the upper hand tactically when they do agree to it. Do you know what I mean? Because she
Yeah.
gives him a nod. He looks to her for approval, and she nods to him,
Yep.
And then he's like, okay, I guess 130 is the new, the new area or the new point. Bernard is super angry, obviously, because he's like, you just gave up a farm, and now we can't starve him out. That's that. Um, yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Also, it's just curious that Camille just keeps leaving her job and going and putting on her old uniform and running around.
Just doing stuff. And I actually thought that the interaction between her and Bernard, this is one of the times when he's looking at her, and I'm like, oh, you really don't want Bernard looking at you like
She
that.
looks pretty shaken, and
She does,
he
but
asks her some pointed questions about like, what does your husband think about the fact that you went and did this and that? And she's like, he knows all about it, which we know he doesn't.
he does not. But she recovers well. She's got good answers, and she's got impeccable answers, honestly, because so much of what she says is like, this is not going to go against the pact, and we have vigilante justice goes against the pact, and so I wanted to intervene, and when I came back, oh no, they had escaped. So there was a little bit of a, you know, I don't know. It was she did a good job, but there was a moment where you're like, oh gosh, she's got to go and run and tell Sims now what's going on. Though of course she doesn't get to do that before.
Because things are moving too fast for her to even do that. Even if that was what she was going to do, who knows? Because she's a wily one, is Camille. Because she
Right.
moves on to the next step in her
It's
plan already, which is to nod at Amundsen and make him make a terrible decision for, well, for
But
Bernard
isn't
anyway.
some of this is also she's trying to make him look bad and
Yeah.
wants to like erode trust in him with Bernard because she's upset about what's happened to her husband. Again, just the parallels between her and Sims and between Kathleen and Billings are definitely parallels in it, but different executions, obviously. Kathleen and Billings are aligned in a way that Sims and Camille are not.
Well,
And
there's a big gulf between Camille and Robert Sims. They like what each other know, whereas Kathleen just wants to be with her husband. What Camille wants is maybe less clear. Does she want her husband to be does she want to support his ambitions, or does she have ambitions of her own? Is like what I don't know. Like that's a question mark for me.
mm, well, we shall see a little bit more of that in the next episode. But in other relationships and trust issues, we've also got a little bit of not even trust issues, but we've got
Oh, there's trust issues in Silo 17. Is that what you're talking about?
oh no, I was going to say not even trust issues, but sort of like interactions between people that don't necessarily. I was going to talk about Pete and Martha when
Oh
he's
yeah.
down deep and you know, there's like, this is the person that took care of Juliet. He's aware of that and he thanks her for no, that's again probably the second one.
No,
Uh
that's this one. He goes in. She's like, "Go away unless you're a friend." And he comes in. He's like, "I hope that I'm still considered a friend." And then they have that scene
yeah.
together. No, that was sweet. I mean, Walker kind of feels a little bit. She's lost because she's missing McLean, and she's supposed to be fulfilling some role. She's like having that flashback even that McLean was like, "You're going to be needed down there more than ever." But she's also doing her like, "I'm going to go off to my workshop and just be by myself" thing. So I feel like we need to kind of kick her in the ass a little bit and get her more involved in what's going on in mechanical and in the lowers. And I don't know that Dr. Nichols coming to see her is going to help in that. What the main thing they talk about is how she thinks that Juliet's actually dead.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
And
yeah, because she's just like, look, I did this for me. I didn't want to see her die on that hillside. Kind of is sort of the motive, I guess, of giving her the good tape. Which, like, unless if Juliet hadn't been able to get into Silo 17, if she had just walked, she would have probably died. Right? Like she had to get inside shelter, and if Silo 17 hadn't been open, she probably wouldn't have made it. because she would have run out of O2.
Right. So, yeah, and she's also, I mean, she's struggling with her feelings about her friend or her partner, former partner. Um,
Yeah.
so that's kind of you know,
And
uh
we have found out that she was never booked into sheriff's custody. She is somewhere in judicial
right.
special custody
Which does
if
not
she's
sound
still alive.
good. Which is not,
Yeah, if she's still alive. So she might be bagged like Kennedy was, or she might be in some other bad situation. Whatever it is, it's probably not great. She was arrested by like 20 raiders,
you know,
considering she was just
not
sitting at a
gonna,
cafe. And
yeah.
then, we're all concerned about Juliet with her bad infection, Solo's clear descent into madness, and then everything seems so great in a way. Like it's clearly not great. She's not going to get to do what she wants to do. He has discovered her in Silo 17 where she passed out at the end of last episode. But now he's like making her tea. He has clearly like fed her antibiotics, which he made.
Yeah, which do you think he actually made them? Because again, it
I don't
feels
know.
something that's kind of beyond his.
He has a weird body of knowledge.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt like even now he said it, I was like, did he actually make them? I don't know. It felt weird. So, but
Yeah.
anyway, regardless, he treated her.
Yep.
But
She's feeling better,
mm,
but now he's keeping her suit hostage
yeah,
so that she'll fix his pump and like so that he can keep living in Silo 17.
yep.
So she's gonna have to go down to level 30, 7 or 8 levels below the water level to fix this pump.
And
So
she's not happy about this. I mean, it's
no,
he's not listening to any kind of argument, which, she's got a time clock ticking,
yeah.
and he is not having any of it. And he's basically like, I need my needs met first, and then you'll get your suit, and that's that. And that's not this is not an easy thing he's asking her to do. So we're talking like if like and I think it was kind of deliberate, like when she went to get the other suit, that how fraught that mission was, and that wasn't
Right.
even deep. And this is
Yeah.
like layers and layers and layers below. So this is gonna take a lot and is very dangerous for her. So yeah, so she's not happy about this, obviously, but she's definitely backed into a corner because he's got the leverage over her, which sucks.
I have a feeling she's gonna need that helmet though to even do this job.
Yeah,
Like,
probably.
because clearly the system that they use, like you said, was complicated and it didn't work even just to go like 30 feet underwater.
Well, I'm sure he'll cough that up if she needs it for his mission.
Yeah.
But he's got to hold, some other kind of leverage over her. But it's good that she didn't die from the wound. Um, and
It would have been tough if Rebecca Ferguson's character had died in, episode 5 of season 2 when there's 10 episodes in this season.
I am
So,
I am very curious about what the actual situation is. Like the more and more Solo reveals, I mean, we know little pieces of it, and her interactions with him, she's like treating him with kid gloves because she knows he's totally unbalanced. But obviously we're gonna get more of the pieces of this later on, or I think we might. But she is very much like operating around him cautiously because she kind of has to. So that's gonna be interesting to see how that pans out. Um, and then the corpse Meadows corpse interaction with Holland, or Holland's interaction with the corpse, is kind of interesting.
Bernard? Is his last name Holland?
Yeah.
Huh. I'm only on first name basis with him. I don't know.
Oh, sorry, Bernard. Um, so that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's super weird. I didn't think we'd have any more scenes with her. That
Just
poor
because
lady has to hold her breath while Tim Robbins talks to her.
I guess part of me was like, was this scene really necessary? Because I
Yeah,
guess,
in a way it wasn't. In a way it wasn't. We already know that he regrets it. Like, and that's kind of what that scene's for.
and we already know that this is that even when he says to her in this is like, well, we know that that's why.
To me,
That
it's still it does a good job though, but I already know that he is isolated and completely alone and has no allies. But he like this is his only friend, is a dead lady in a way. And
she
so when he
like
when he puts he swears in Lucas Kyle as his shadow at the end of this episode, which is bananas,
Yeah.
or close to the end of it. Um, like this scene does help you, I guess, understand why he is there. But again, I'm like, Sims feels like a more logical choice still, even though they are not quite a lot on the same page. They at least want the silo to continue in the way that it is going. They
So
both believe in the pact and the order.
they do, but he's never gonna trust the way that Sims operated in the he's gonna, even though he's the hand that really killed Meadows, he's always gonna blame Sims for that. And then the other part of it is that the the leverage he does have over Lucas, and like even just dropping some of like the interesting part, about, oh, there's you have to have access to the legacy, and then he's like, all right, you're going to be my shadow, so you can have access to this, and just even dropping that kind of knowledge on someone who has figured out a lot of this stuff on his own. I think he's counting on the fact that Lucas is going to be in awe of some of this. Um, and he's still more controllable than Sims. And so I think he's going to take that calculated risk, even though he knows that um, Lucas has been a Juliet ally, or has been doing things that are sort of outside of that thing. But you're right. I think Sims certainly has shown that he wants the silo to continue, but maybe it's the Camille factor that he is worried about. So I don't know. Well, it's going to be an interesting ride.
It will be for sure. And we will continue this ride in the next time we get together for Reanimated for episode 7, The Dive, also directed by Michael Dinner with a new writer, Catherine DiSavino. I don't know if she's new, but not the same writer as this episode. Looking forward to it so much. Get us an email. Get it to us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, and then you can find the rest of our episodes online. Reanimated Podcast. Nope, I said that one already. Reanimated.podbean.com. And more people have been finding us on YouTube, and that's awesome. We are there. We are on Spotify. You can find us places. I thank you.
Until next time, adieu. Thanks for listening.